Tes Cheshvan Tovshin Ayin Tes. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer Mamorim Tovshin Yud Gimel. In the Mamar Shavuos Tovshin Yud Gimel. Vayedaber Elokim is called Dvarim Ha'ela. We are on page Kuf Ayin. 3 lines from the top. The beginning of the line starts Vihine. Just to recap quickly, briefly, what the Rebbe said up until this point. The Rebbe began the Mamar on the pasuk in Pashas Yisroi, the verse in Pashas Yisroi, which talks about the giving of the Torah, or Hashem speaking the Torah, saying the Ten Commandments to the Jewish people. And it says, Vayedaber Elokim, and Hashem spoke as Kol Advarim Ha'ela, all these words, Leimer, so to say. And then it goes into the 10 Commandments that said as a dibris. Leimer normally denotes to communicate to others. Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe, Leimer is the common expression in the Torah. Hashem spoke to Moshe. Leimer, to say, what does it mean to say? To say unto the others, to say to the Jewish people. So the Rebbe asked the question, when it came to the 10 Commandments, all the Jewish people were there. Not only all the Jewish people from that generation, but all the souls from all the Jewish people of all generations. So what's the meaning of the word Leimer? The second question that Rebbe asked was that in the first commandment it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, Asher Etzisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim, who has taken you out from the land of Egypt, mibeis avodim, from the house of slavery. So first of all, the Rebbe said it's a long-winded way of expressing it. If the idea is to say that I have extracted you from Egypt, from the house of slavery, Anochi Asher Etzisicha mibeis avodim, from the land of Egypt, from the house of slavery. Right? The other question is, why Hashem Elokecha? Anochi Asher Etzisicha mibeis avodim. What's the meaning of each of these added terms and names? What does it add to the context of what is being communicated? So in order to explain that, the Rebbe explained that whatever we find in Torah, we find in man and in the world. And the Rebbe began to focus on the 4 kinds, the 4 types of creatures that exist in the world. All of creation is in one of 4 brackets, one of 4 categories. Doimim, Tzemech, Chai, Medaber. The inanimate, that which grows, that which lives, meaning the animal kingdom, and then of course humans. So the Rebbe explained, obviously this is in the physical sense. The Rebbe explained it in Avodas Hashem, B'nefesh Ha'adam, right? So the first step is the Rebbe explained all this in the difference between these 4 kinds in the simple sense. Then the Rebbe moved from there into Avodas Hashem, how it expresses itself in man's service of Hashem. Doimim being the lowest form of service of Hashem, which is like letters. Doimim, stones. The corresponding aspect of that is letters. Otiyot, oisius. On their own, they're inanimate. Right? Mm-hmm. Then there is Tzemeach, which is serving Hashem. I'm just summarizing it. Tzemeach is the level of serving Hashem. So in other words, service of Hashem in the form of letters of Doimim means I do what I need to do by rote. Mitzvahs anoshim melumada. I just keep on doing it because that's what I have to do. No big contemplations, no big thought process or emotions involved. Just doing what I need to do. The lowest form of service of Hashem. The next level is Tzemeach, where I serve Hashem with some feeling and with animation, as it were, with some life. But like a tree or a Tzemeach or a vegetable that is rooted to, even though it lives because it grows, but it's rooted to its place. It can't move from place to place. It's not mobile. So too, the emotions that are involved in the action of serving Hashem is limited to what comes to me naturally. Then there is Chai, serving Hashem with what the Rebbe termed Midas Sichlium, Midas Tivium and Midas Sichlium, right? The Rebbe called it actually Midos. Right. So the high manner in which to serve Hashem is by emotions that are animated by the intellect. So the intellect has the ability to cause emotions to grow. When you contemplate something, the emotions grow. So my love for Hashem, my fear of Hashem, is as a result of my contemplation in seichel, in my intellect, and that causes it to grow and to move from its confined natural state into a state which is sort of takes the person out of his comfort zone.
Like an animal moves.
Correct, like an animal that moves from place to place. Then you have medaber, which is the point that we're up to now, Kuf Ayin, where the Rebbe explains that the idea of serving Hashem in the form of medaber, the Rebbe says, actually, although letters are the lowest form, right? Doimim is the lowest form of creation. Letters is the lowest form of expression on its own, or rather, not expression, but it's the lowest forms, let's say, in Avodas Hashem, of serving Hashem in the form of letters, which is like Kabbalah's oil or Mitzvahs Anochi Milumodo, just very basic, without any animation. Nevertheless, letters comes from the very essence of the soul. The ability to take letters and to separate one sound, one expression from another expression, that is rooted in the very essence of the soul, even beyond seichel, even beyond intellect. The Rebbe called it kadmus ha-seichel, the primordial state of intellect. It's basically intellect as it's rooted within the very essence of the soul. It's the very essence of the soul that causes the person to have the ability for different pronunciation, to express an aleph, to express a beis, to cut the letters with the different expressions of the mouth, the tongue, the palate, the cheeks, and so on and so forth. That ability comes from the very essence of the soul. So it is, letters is daimon, but the ability to express those letters, that comes from the very essence of the soul. That's medaber. That's why the human is called medaber, the one who speaks, rather than bal seichel, the one that has intellect. Because speech, the ability to speak, the ability to use letters, comes from the very essence of the soul.
But it's not really explained, because you do that in the lower level. You are using the letters. I know the source of it is, but in terms of avodas Hashem.
So in terms of avodas Hashem, the Rebbe says that there is the difference between serving fulfilling the Ratzon Hashem, the will of Hashem, or serving the Baal HaRatzon. I serve Hashem Himself. It's not that I'm fulfilling Hashem's will, I'm serving Hashem. Just like the ability to use letters is a function of the essence of the soul, so too in serving Hashem, it means serving not the lower levels, but rather the very essence, meaning Hashem Himself. What's the difference? It's a subtle difference, right? Of course, I mean, Hashem's will is Hashem's will. What is the difference between serving Hashem or fulfilling Hashem's will? It seems to be the same way, a different way of expressing the same thing. Says the Rebbe, no. The difference will be that if you fulfill Hashem's will, then if it's Hashem's will, and it's a result of an intellectual contemplation or a feeling that I have, then some mitzvahs will be more important, some mitzvahs will be less important. I'll have more feeling for some mitzvahs, less feeling for others. As we know, mitzvahs are divided into kalis shebekalis, chamuris shebechamuris. They're more stringent mitzvahs. There are lighter mitzvahs, or at least that's the way they are perceived, right? So if it's dependent, if my service of Hashem is a result of my intellect or my emotions, necessarily I'll be drawn to certain mitzvahs more strongly and not drawn as strongly to others. Whereas when I serve Hashem Himself, it makes absolutely no difference to me what the mitzvah is. The kalis shebekalis, that which is perceived as the lightest mitzvah, has the same veracity as a mitzvah that is considered the harshest. That doesn't come into play. That's where we're up to. So 2 lines from the top, page Kuf Ayin. V'hinei inyan zeh, this idea, so in other words, to use the terminology of the Rebbe, there's the bittul, man's nullification to Hashem's will, or man's nullification to Hashem. Man's nullification to the Rotzen, or man's nullification to the Baal HaRotzen, the master of the will. What is the expression of this? Inyan zeh, this idea, misbate, is expressed bekach, shekalis shebekalis v'chamuris shebechamuris, that the lightest of the light mitzvahs and the harshest of the harshest mitzvahs, heim shovim mamish, are completely equal by the person. When we talk about natural or intellectual love and fear of Hashem, meaning emotions that are vested in mitzvahs, that emanate from man's natural tendency to be drawn to Hashem, or through an intellectual contemplation. So in that sense, the love and fear, since it emanates from something which is related to man, yesh hefresh ben kalis shebekalis, there's a difference between a lighter mitzvah, v'chamuris shebechamuris, or a harsher mitzvah. That is, when it emanates from the Abivir, the Tivim, the Sichlim, the natural or intellectual love and fear of Hashem. But when we talk about a state of nullification to the master of the will, meaning to Hashem himself, ein hefresh klal, there will be no differentiation, no difference between the lightest of the light mitzvahs, between the lightest of the lightest mitzvahs to the harshest of the harshest mitzvahs. Why? Being that the person is nullified to the master of the will himself, to Hashem himself. So if my commitment is to fulfill Hashem, if my commitment is to Hashem, so whatever Hashem says is equally important. So what is the motivation? What motivates the person to fulfill the mitzvahs here, in this situation, in this condition? It is because this is the way things need to be from the point of view of the master of the will, of Hashem. Right? So in that sense, what difference does it make what he wants? They're all equal. What's the result? This is the idea that the Rebbe is driving at. What the Rebbe is driving at is that ultimately the highest form of serving Hashem and the lowest form of serving Hashem have a very strong connection. Right? Because what are oisius in the lowest? Daimim. Daimim is Kabbalah Sel. In other words, it's devoid of feeling. It's devoid of intellect. But over there, it's devoid of feeling and intellect because it's lower than feeling and intellect. Whereas when we talk about serving Hashem on the Medaber level, right? As it is rooted in the very essence of the soul, the bittul, the nullification of man, to the Baal HaRatzon, to Hashem himself, again, in a certain sense, it's devoid of feeling and intellect. But not because it's lower than feeling and intellect, rather because it's higher than feeling and intellect. It's the very essence. And when we talk about the very essence, it makes no difference what I feel, what I think, that doesn't come into play, because it comes from the very essence of the soul. The Nimtza says the Rebbe, what is the result? That in this manner of serving Hashem, kiyum ha-mitzvahs eine mitzad hergish. The man fulfills mitzvahs at this level, not as a result of the person's own feeling, or the person's or any self-awareness, as it were. It is similar to serving Hashem in a manner of rote. Mitzvahs and Hashem Elamada, the mitzvahs that are fulfilled just by a manner of rote as Kabbalah Soil. What's the generality of this concept? What's the sum of this concept? In other words, where does the virtue of serving Hashem at the level of Medaber express itself? It's revealed specifically in the daimim, in the inanimate, in the lowest level, specifically. So Kabbalah's oil is linked to serving Hashem from the very essence of the soul. So this is the idea of serving Hashem at the four levels of daimim, tzemei, chai, medaber. In the next section, the Rebbe is going to speak about how we find these four levels also in Torah itself. Because if you remember what the Rebbe is explaining here in answer to his questions, the way he's constructing this is, he's basing it on the idea that whatever you find in the Torah, we find in the world and we find in man, right? Because Torah is the blueprint of creation, of the world. And also man is called a small universe and the world is called a big man, ha'elam hu guf katan, right? And the Adam, ha'elam hu, what's the expression? Olam katan zeh ha'adam. The small universe is man. Man is a microcosm of the world, and the world is a macrocosm of man. So man, the world, and Torah are all linked. So having explained how we find them in tzemei, chai, medaber, these four types in the world, and how we find them in man and in the service of man, the Rebbe is now going to explain in the next section how we find it in Torah as well.